It's now time to introduce our first speaker, Karen May. Karen is the Associate Director of the Australian Centre of Excellence for Post-Traumatic Stress for the Road Home, and also currently working on a PhD at Adelaide University. Karen is focusing on a therapeutic model for children of a parent with service-related post-traumatic stress. Karen's background is psychotherapy, participatory action research, and community development. To present on PTS, environmental scan, and gaps in research, please welcome Karen May.
Hi everybody. Many of you I will have liaised with over the past year as speakers and participants to attend today, and it's very exciting to see it all come together. It's been a community of you that I've met at various international events over the past few years, at Invictus Games Symposiums, the ASCN Symposium, and others. And it's just wonderful that we have this community that we've sort of named at those meetings as the Global Alliance of researchers and policymakers and practitioners that are really determined to come together, collaborate, share knowledge, and that's what this is all about. So at the Australian Centre of Excellence for Post-Traumatic Stress, we see our key mandate as fostering those collaborations and partnerships. So whilst we do run our own national grant rounds and philanthropically fund research, and we've just finished one of those grant rounds, which will be announced at the Remembrance Day breakfast, which had a theme of research into families. Whilst we do that, we also support at our research centre that many of the internationals were able to visit yesterday at the new Jamie Larkham Hospital. And at that research centre, which is now co-located with a clinical setting, we're able to support other researchers from anywhere around the country to access research in that facility and liaise with clinicians, and of course we're always looking to improve models of care, so it's wonderful to have that centre. So I'll just actually today talk very briefly before I introduce the next speaker about a project that we are able to launch, and I can happily say I've got the report in my hot little hand. It will be available for download on the website. Our Centre of Excellence and the Road Home board decided that we wanted to commission an environmental scan into post-traumatic stress research, focusing on veterans, first responders and families, and something that the whole community of researchers and policy and practitioners could access and look at where are the gaps, what can we start to focus on, what are the emerging areas of research of interest, and what are some of the priorities. So I'm just going to quickly cover a few key points on that, and then you can download the whole report and have a closer look if you like. So just quickly, some of the key facts and findings about the environmental scan is that the research into post-traumatic stress is voluminous. It's heavily quantitative research. It's also quite disparate, and it's heterogeneous in focus. I'll expand on that in this next slide. But it also found that most of the published academic research on post-traumatic stress originates in the USA, which I guess is no surprise with population in the US. And that we also, though, have a very well-established PTS research history in Australia. As I said, there's a large volume, and that the majority comes from the US, the heavily quantitative base, and interestingly, a very strong focus on treatment. And the focus on treatment tends to be heterogeneous in focusing on veterans and military, so very little research on first responders as yet, and it's also very heavily focused on men in that cohort. So I just move to the next slide. So the challenges for us in PTS research is the disparate nature of research, and a following slide that I'll show in a moment just shows you a bit of a scan of how disparate that research picture looks like. But there is a limited but growing focus on program evaluations, which is really, really interesting for any of those who attended the masterclasses this morning and looking at some of the newer approaches in therapies. There are evaluations happening, some we've funded in Australia in art therapy, not ART, as we heard this morning, accelerated resolution therapy. But yeah, we saw some of the research studies on trying to get an evidence base around accelerated resolution therapy. And it's great to see some of those program evaluations coming. We've got speakers here today that you'll be able to hear from some of those programs, such as equine therapy. We've got Susan DeSaley, we've got Dr. John Lane presenting on STARE model, which is he's adapted from an individual therapy into a group peer-led program. So those evaluations, it's really interesting that that's a growing area. The limited focus on first responders, that's something that certainly we hope to see more research. Our local Metropolitan Fire Service in South Australia put itself on the line as the study group for one of the first significant studies of mental health in an emergency service. And they were a brave organisation to do it. It was a difficult ride, but at the end of it, they grasped the findings and have been able to implement and are still working on some very exciting strategies to address mental health. The other area being women and LGBTI communities and families, as I mentioned earlier. And the weak connection between some of the subsectors as well is an interesting area that I think, well, I hope that we can actually really, that's something that I think might come out of this conference, is getting that interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approach to start to work together on projects coming at it from different. So that's just a quick slide of showing you the skew in population groups, so veterans and active members, emergency services on the 47 there, and the humanitarian aid group in the smaller slice. Research methodologies, again, showing the skew to quantitative research, a little bit then next on qualitative, some reviews, commentaries, and the mixed method, which is, of course, quantitative and qualitative, another small group, and another even smaller group on case studies. And then this slide, all of these infographics are available in the report, and there's some more detail and some other diagrams in there as well, but just again showing the focus on treatment and interventions, impacts and associations, going right through to a much more limited lot of research on things like training and education, but also interestingly on screening and diagnostics. And I think that's a really important thing that we need to consider as some of the research, and I know Miranda's presentation may cover this, it may not, but I know I've seen in some of her other presentations the real crossover in diagnostics, which is really hard for clinicians when they're trying to see between all the comorbidities that make up PTSD, what are we actually dealing with? Is it bipolar disorder, or is it PTSD? What are we actually dealing with? So I think that's a real gap in research that we could certainly do a lot more on. And that was that diagram, which you probably can't read very well from there, but you can download in the report. And that just shows, again, where the concentrated areas of research and then the huge array of areas of research that are developing.